Michelle, for that question. I think that as we look at the legislative process, we're going to see where we end up, which is probably around April, on where our funding actually is going to be getting into that May budget time. What was projected versus what we've seen in the last couple of months or couple quarters is that budget kind of dwindling down in terms of that deficit. So it went from possibly, I think it was 2.5 is the largest I saw, down to about 2 now. I'm hoping it gets down to about 1.7, 1.5. If you look at what happened in the budget process from last year, we did $1 billion in vetoes, and that got us to exactly where we are in terms of keeping everything stable. So if that was mostly membership project, a little bit of the trust, and if it stays the course that way, no member projects will happen, no trust will happen, but everything else will stay online. If you're looking at that $1 billion, I kind of tell everyone $1 billion to $1.5 billion we probably could stomach without any cuts. After that, you're going to start really seeing that pie where whoever it is, whether it's healthcare, education, you name it, start really taking a hit. And there's a lot of other sectors as well, just not those that I mentioned. But I will say that I think that the governor has made a very strong statement in the education dollars in terms of making sure that teachers are funded. He's been an advocate for it from day one, and you saw the legislature follow through with that. While I sit on a budget committee, I'm not a chair of a budget committee, so I will work with our chairman, who is Senator Doug Broxson, in terms of making sure that education dollars are first in front in terms of where we need to spend our dollars. And if we're going to cut anywhere, it needs to be other sectors out of education. So you can get my support there, and we will continue to work with them on making sure that the chairman that'll go forward.
Thank you, Travis. We appreciate that. Obviously, education is our top priority, being a bunch of education in this call. So I took advantage of asking the first question. I'd now like to open it up to those on the call. I know some of you have your questions ready to go. If you could use the raised hand icon, and Kate will unmute you, and we'll take it from there. And I see Gwen with her hand raised. Oh, yeah. Now she has. Gwen, can you unmute yourself? Sorry. Thought we could do it from here. Thanks.
Okay. One is a statement including a question, and the Florida retirement system, FRS, has routinely been found to be one of the wealthiest and healthiest and well-funded in the country. Why does the legislature keep tinkering with HRS? And when is it going to restore COLA? COLA.
Thank you, Gwen, for that question. I'm not familiar with COLA, so you may have to educate me there. As it relates to the retirement system and what you've seen in the past, I think the legislature was, and I'm speaking for myself, not the other members, but I think the legislature is trying to make sure those that have put into the retirement system get their money back. Some get in when they're only 3 or 4 years in and invested, or not invested, but 3 or 4 years in and not vested, and they don't get to receive their money. So if you've looked at past bills, it's been you put in your money, you get to take it wherever you want and spend it however you want, thinking that you can make an educated decision for what's best for your retirement dollars. I don't know what's been filed yet because it's very early on. I know there's some things that's looking at FRS coming down the pipeline, but the ultimate goal, from what I understand, is to make sure that if Gwen is putting dollars in, she can receive those dollars back. And if you happen to go in without being vested, you still get that money. Where I have had hesitations, and I voted for the bill in the past when I was a House member, is I want to guarantee that anybody that is currently in that system, make sure they get paid in full as they retire, because that was the deal that you signed up for when you came in. So if the legislature is going to make any change, I want to make sure that that changes for future members and that we honor the promises and commitments made to you as the individual member prior to that. And that's what I've asked anybody that's looking at that to put that in writing, so we make sure that your dollars are guaranteed, and it would be for future members in the future.
Okay.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Travis. Next, I'd like to call on Catherine Clark. And Catherine, if you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My question is about SB 78 dues and uniform assessments. This is a bill that requires public sector union members such as teachers, fire, and police to re-sign their union membership forms every year and have the management confirm by asking, are you sure you really wanted to join? I've read about this. We don't need to fix a problem that doesn't exist. And I think a lot of people have that opinion. This could create a problem. The measure will only cause a lot of frustration for employers and confusion for employees. Senator, you are sitting on one of the committees. How can you help us with this?
Thank you, Catherine, for that question. I actually watched that in its first committee. I did not sit on there, but I happened to have a little bit of downtime in the Capitol, so turned it on. My understanding is when you do your actual membership, you sign up for your union assessment. That would also be a second signature. And then also what you had mentioned, they may have to sign every year if it changes. Want to talk to the member if it comes in front of my committee, which I think it does next, as you just mentioned, when it comes up, and talk to them about how often are they signing, and see what the ramifications are. I mean, obviously, I think that you guys are smart enough to know if you want to be part of something, then a signature, that you're going to sign will put you in there. But at the same time, I don't want that burden that you're facing that you talked about. So I want to talk to him about the member that has filed the bill. I believe it's Senator Rodriguez. Why do we want it to go every year or every time there's a change? And hear his answers to that. I don't want it to be an overburden to you, but I want to make sure that you have all the capabilities to look at what's coming in front of you and make that decision to yourself. So I will have those conversations with him in a format, either phone call or probably bring it up in front of the committee and let him answer those himself.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Travis. And it is Rodriguez who sponsored that bill. And just to add my 2 cents, we are adamantly opposed to it. We'll move on. The next person, I'd like to call on Megan Young. Megan, if you would unmute yourself, please.
Good evening, everybody. So my question kind of boils down to equity. So my question is, why has the legislature been so slow moving in passing laws that ensure that accountability for charter schools and private schools that receive state funding is the same and equitable as the accountability that's placed on public schools?
Thank you, Megan, for that question. That's a great question. I've constantly asked for, and if you guys have it, constantly asked for people when I'm in delegation meetings to kind of send me, where is that equitability? What are we doing for private schools or charters that are unfair because we're doing a strenuous amount to public schools? I'd love to see that. I want to compare them apples to apples. I don't think it's fair that a private school is held to a different or lower standard to our children than a public or charter school. So if you can get me that data of what they may be doing, and I think Michelle probably can easily get me that. But I've asked everyone for the last 2 years in delegation meetings. I would love to try and put them on the same playing field, because you can't say you want certain standards for a set of students and not certain standards for the other. I don't think it's fair. And if we want accountability to be the biggest thing for our children, I want the top highest level from all sectors of our education system.
Thank you, Megan. Next, we're going to call on Kelly Abbott-Tennozzi. Kelly, please unmute yourself.
Hi, Senator Hutson. Kelly Abbott-Tennozzi. I met you last year in Tallahassee. Great to see you again. Couple things before I ask my question. First of all, I like your answer. There shouldn't be lower standards when it comes to public dollars in those charter schools. And then just to let you know, when Gwen was asking you the retirement question, COLA is the cost of living adjustment. So it's just an acronym for that. I figured you probably knew it, but forgot. Anyway, I'm grateful for the increase in pay that teachers have received, and hope that the legislature will provide another increase this year to help out the veteran teachers. Our district had to split the money and give most of it to our newer teachers. And they desperately needed a decent raise, but there wasn't enough money to provide a decent increase for experienced educators. And it costs a lot to live and work in St. Johns County. Would it be possible to attach a more equitable split to provide a better increase for experienced teachers? Oh, you're muted, sir. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that question, and thank you for the COLA, an acronym. I do know the cost of living, didn't know the acronym at the time. We actually looked at this because I've got a lot of problems with, it's actually Flagler County just to the south, where they're losing money because of where teachers actually live versus where they work. So we've actually tried to make some of those adjustments. I want to do more. I want to make sure that they're taking into account everything when it comes to some of those dollars. It's in the FEFP. And if you've ever looked at those formulas, they get really crazy in terms of how deep in depth they go. In terms of the veteran teachers, I think we want to do more. I mean, I know from the governor, he wants to do more. You guys have proven time and time again, especially during the pandemic, you're kind of our first line of defense. Like you're the individuals that keep us going, because with our kids if our kids are not at school, we have problems, right? Not only in the family, but the education realm of what's going on with our children. I talked to actually St. Johns County, it was the admin side of things last week. And I've seen it with my kids, how many times you've had to quarantine because of close contacts. So we definitely want to fund our teachers. We want to do more. And more importantly, I'm actually supposed to be meeting with the governor soon, I hope. But one of the first things I'm going to say is after our 65-year-olds, when we get them, and it could take a couple months to get all of them, teachers are the next, in my opinion, in terms of getting the shots and the vaccines, because that is the most important thing to me, is to make sure my kids do not have to miss another day of school, because it definitely upsets their life cycle. So you'll see me push and advocate for that when I get in front of the governor.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Travis, for mentioning that about teachers getting the vaccines. We are very appreciative of that, and we'll definitely follow up with you on that comment. Next up, Andrea Clark. Andrea, please unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, Senator Hutson. My question is about annual contracts. The annual contracts were supposed to help weed out low-performing teachers and help our district recruitment by attracting highly effective instructors. In reality, the annual contract has not helped recruitment, nor has it eased the teacher shortage. It has, in fact, exacerbated the problem because teachers no longer have a sense of job security. Isn't it time to reconsider now? And how can the legislature fix this problem for us?
Andrea, thank you so much for your question. In fact, I didn't realize this was a problem until Michelle sent me the email a couple of days ago. I want to get with our staff. I want to talk to our commissioner. I understand the goal to weed out those teachers that are underperforming, but those that are performing, either effective or highly effective, should be more on a long-term basis. I don't want to lose great educators because we're making the system over-exacerbating for them. So I'm glad that I have this question. I'm glad that I have it in writing from Michelle, and that's something I want to focus on too. I do have an education bill, I didn't mention it earlier, that deals with pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs, but it is a vehicle to handle all other education issues. I believe Senator Broder is filing something as well. But we want to look at some of these questions that you have, because the last thing we want is teachers to feel discouraged and not be able to teach, given the fact we already have a teacher shortage in the state of Florida. And if this is something that we can fix, I'm going to definitely look into it.
Thank you, Andrea. Next up, we have Sally Cunningham. Sally, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Senator Hutson. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to sit with us. You know, historically, Republican-controlled policies don't necessarily favor teachers. And, you know, we've been watching you closely, and, you know, as you know, we endorsed you this last election. And I want to say that's because of your support for us. We know It's not always something you can do immediately, but we know we're in this for the long haul, and we know you are too. So just want to thank you so much for all that you're doing for us. My question revolves around FSA testing this year. So I know we canceled it last year, and as the testing coordinator at my school, I have gotten some information that basically says, hang on, we're looking at it. We're not sure, we haven't canceled it, but we're not sure what might change for schedules and things like that. So I was hoping you could touch base tonight with us. The biggest concern I hear from teachers is, I'm teaching face-to-face. My partner teacher is teaching distance learning. The lady down the end of the hall, she's got both. How can we, think about giving an assessment system that's going to reflect those differences, and how can that information be good for students and parents as well as teachers? Because we take a lot of our time looking at data and moving forward with that. So any information you have about testing would be well received.
Thank you, Sally. And I was thrilled to get the endorsement that you guys gave me. I was tickled to death. I thought it was great. And I think it just shows that Michelle and I constantly call and work together all the time. So it's just, I think it's a testament to the fact that I'm always there for you, but at the same time, you've always got my back. So I appreciate that. As it relates to testing, and I'm going to let, obviously the commissioner is the one kind of steering the ship here, but at the end of the day, from a policy side of things, I think that for me, I don't think that it's a problem to have the testing itself, but where I draw the line is we should not penalize you this year for anything that happens with the students. We understand, I personally understand, but we understand that it's been a very difficult year being on, off, and trying to figure out what's going on with different quarantine methods and or vaccines and or different things that are going on with the children's lives, close contact. I don't mind getting the test to see the data, but I do not want to penalize you at all for having the test. I want to know whether you're better than Hillsborough County and what policies have we put in place that Hillsborough's put in place. And I'm not picking on them. That was the first thing that came to my mind. But what have they put in place and what have we put in place and what has happened with that data? I think it's important for us to know if a county is doing something better than us, maybe we need to look at their policies, but vice versa. If we're leading the charge, which, we're St. Johns County, I kind of assume we are. I'm a little biased here, but if we're leading the charge in terms of our kids doing a great job, still staying on par, then the rest of the state needs to know that. And we need to show them what we're doing and how we're getting through this so that others can equal our standards. But I do not want to punish the teachers or the school district based on bad performances. I think we could look at the data, but again, I think we do like we did last year and say, if we have bad data, and we've actually done this every time we up the standards, where you have a test and then we say, okay, that didn't count for this year just because it's brand new. So I want to be able to do that and make sure that you're not held liable for anything that would be detrimental to you, given the fact that we're in unprecedented times.
Thank you. And a very quick follow-up. I know you mentioned comparing data maybe with Hillsborough or another county. Mm-hmm. So are you going to be looking at how instruction was delivered? I have a sister who teaches in Palm Beach County and elementary school, and they've been online this entire time, but face-to-face, like in the classroom, but on the computer. It's just very different depending on dollars and leadership. And so is that going to come into play when you guys are looking at this data, or are you just looking at achievement?
Yeah, well, for me, and I don't want to speak for the rest of my colleagues, but exactly what you just said, if they're online face-to-face and their kids perform way better than ours who are in the school, well, then obviously it's safer to teach online and they're getting the same education or better than ours, and vice versa. If you have to come in, then that's important. So I think what we need to look at is the data from all subsets, whether or how you're giving the material, but also, I mean, again, we're looking at maybe St. Johns County School, A, for example, went into quarantine 30 times over a school year, where St. Johns County School B went into quarantine 5 times. And we're going to look at that data too. So I want to look at everything because I want actual metrics, not that I want to punish anybody, any student, any teachers. I just want to see what's working in the state of Florida. And when we find out what's working, that's what I want to look at in terms of implementing. And honestly, we just don't know we don't know the results until we actually look at it.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see you again, sir.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Sally. Next up, we have Carol Garanskas. Carol, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Senator Hutson. And I will be very forthwith in saying that I am the vice president of the Florida Education Association. However, my heart is St. Johns County. I was the former president of the support unit with Michelle as the president of the teachers unit. And we have met before. So I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity and that you've joined us this evening. And I always go back to my roots, which was as an education staff professional. And as much as we always mention the teachers and the TSA money, the teacher salary allocation, this year there have been several districts around this state that did not put any money toward the bus drivers, the cafeteria, the paraprofessionals, the front office staff, because so much money had to go to TSA. And we can't do our jobs without our teachers, but we can't get our children to school without our drivers, and we can't feed them without our staff. And so I'd like to know what the plan is going forward. I see the budget. We have $132 per student increase based on what the governor has said. But of course, we all know, as you just stated, that it has to go through the process. But it's been very difficult to be a frontline worker and not receive any increase this year in many districts. And so I was just hoping to have your opinion on that, as well as when you talk to the governor, please, not just for teachers to receive the vaccination, but for our bus drivers and our cafeteria and all of our support staff. I have written way too many condolence letters this year to our members who have not made it through COVID. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And yeah, it's unfortunate that those that have lost their lives to this, but it's been a difficult time. In terms of the vaccination, I think anybody that's related in any type of school environment that could potentially shut down classrooms and or the campus as it relates to being getting the virus, I think everyone should get it. So I agree with you. It should be everyone that's in close contact with our children. I want them in the schools as much as possible. And that's something, like I said, I will talk to the governor about. In terms of your other employees outside of your teachers, it's interesting. You know, there's times where we came under Rick Scott, I think it was 2014, where we increased the BSA. I think it was like $200 per student. And it was through the BSA itself. And we said, fund the teachers. And we saw school districts kind of not really do that. Some did, some didn't. And then you get into what we did this year, which was through the FEFP, but we also had some of the BSA where we kind of said, fund the teachers, and then here's more on the BSA to do what you want with it. And again, we're not seeing that happen. And as much as I don't want to dictate from the top down to the school district how to spend their money, I mean, first and foremost, it should be the employees. I think the governor's budget was pretty healthy in his recommendations with the BSA. I've always been an advocate for the BSA to give that complete flexibility. And as much as I don't want to tell the school districts how to spend their money, I'm 100% an advocate for you guys and think that y'all continue to fight at that local level to make sure that you get every ounce of that BSA that you possibly can. And as I said, up here, I'm a big believer in the BSA. I want that money to be stretched as far as it can and that number to be stretched as far as it can so you can go fight locally for those dollars.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next up, we have Debbie Linger. Debbie, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Senator Hutson. I have a question. I'm hearing that students with disabilities who attend some of the private schools are forced to forfeit many of their protections provided to students and families under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Is it true that families can lose the same services that would be covered in a public school setting under their individual education program or otherwise their IEP when they transfer to a private school? What can the state do to ensure equity for all of these students?
Thank you very much, Debbie, for that question. We heard about this, I believe it was 2 summers ago, and we came up and did a bill, and I'm drawing a blank whether it passed or not. I thought it did, to try and be more equitable about that. We do not want anyone with disabilities to be punished for whatever school they attend. I think, and I don't know if a bill is filed yet, but I think we're going to continue to look at this. I think any school that does something that you just discussed not only is despicable, but should be punished for it. And if we're going to have charters and or private schools continue to do things to the disabled or anybody else of a protective class, then they do not need to be a school, in my opinion. These people are protected for a reason. And it's something that I think we need to take a little more seriously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Next, we have a guest on our call from Florida Schools for the Deaf and Blind. It's a little bit outside of St. John's Education Association, but Jessica Caspar, welcome. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Senator Hutson, for being willing to listen and be a champion for teachers and students in the state. My concerns regard mostly the FSA and the district assessment, specifically as a parent of a 3rd grader this year. I know that some of the teachers and some of the parents, some of the teachers and our students have kind of moved everything to go distance learning. And so if the state is requiring, if the education commissioner and the governor is requiring us to give the FSAs, what safety provisions and what kind of things are being ensured for those distance learners who would be required to report physically to the testing site? Especially, I know I wanted to address, you mentioned the purpose of the data that the FSA would bring. And you mentioned that while, that it would be good to have data, but I'm not sure how valid or reliable the data could be if you were unable to know within the classroom how many times students had to transfer to distance learning. And I think in this county that now the distance learners have been given whole new teachers. And so even some of the younger students are having to transition. Those are a lot of changes. I know that the county does a lot of formative assessments that I know that could be used to also drive that same data, and in fact may give more information in regards to assessment and which instructional model would be most effective. So I think, personally as a special educator, as a parent, as a spouse of an educator, that we'd be able to compromise and offer, it's going to be optional, you won't be penalized, especially for those students where it's a high stakes test, such in 3rd grade. So if students don't take it, will then the state say, you have to be retained. And if summer schools and things like that are not offered virtually, what's the plan for the huge number in retention that we may have? I do want to address the COVID slide. I know teachers have been asked and districts have been asked to address in special education children who have shown the COVID slide. But I have not seen, or perhaps I've just not been well informed of the extra funding and the training and the identification tools that has been passed down in order to make sure that those students continue to slide. And I don't know how we could possibly show intervention and growth if we aren't given the tools to intervene in COVID slide before we're expected to give the FSA. Lastly, I want to echo your concerns that teachers should be next on the list. I feel strongly that the governor made it very important for essential workers to report to work. And I think it is hugely important that essential workers be also given vaccinated and priority for that, as it was determined. But I believe those are all my points. I appreciate you listening. I look forward to your answers, and I hope you'll address some of these with the governor when you meet with him.
Thank you for that. So as it relates to testing and showing up for testing, the legislative body, obviously we meet during session to handle legislation. So that's mostly from the executive branch and the commissioner. We're letting them kind of tell us what the plan is, and then we will weigh in after they kind of roll out the plan. But the goal is to keep you safe. I don't think they've said anything in terms of how they're going to formulate those tests and bring you in versus bring the kids in, but we're waiting on those answers from both the commissioner and the governor. In terms of the data itself, and you just mentioned some other data that you had, it's important to have that data, right? So whether X school is done better than Y school, and we need to figure out why. Like you just mentioned, some of the teachers may have come in mid semester. That's important to know, because if teachers are coming in mid semester and they're doing worse than the other schools, that's definitely a problem that we need to take into account. There's tons of data there that we probably don't even know, just me and you talking, of things that we couldn't contemplate, right? So we need to just look at it. We don't want to punish, as I mentioned before, we don't want to punish these kids. We don't want to retain any of these children, but we'd like to know where they're at least as a lawmaker, I would like to know where they're at. The governor and commissioner may have another idea, but I'd love to just see it and see who's doing better. I mean, again, I'm very biased. I know St. Johns County does really, really good with our children. I still think we're going to be number one despite everything that's happened, but we need to see what St. John's is doing differently than other school districts. And then if St. John's is really doing a great job, which I think they will be, we need to make sure other school districts follow suit and do those things that we put in place. In terms of your superintendent, who's sent me several emails with my own children, it's very clear to me that they've got a handle on, as soon as a kid tests positive, they have taken all the kids and teachers out of the classroom. They do their 10-day quarantine. He has been on top of it all. The teachers have called us as parents. I don't know if other school districts are doing that. I don't know if they're following suit in terms of making sure that kids are safe, which is something you mentioned with that slide approach. But I know St. John's, just because of my own child, has done a great job communicating with the individuals of parents and or the students themselves. So it's something I think we're all kind of learning. I mean, quite honestly, you're asking government to handle a pandemic, which I never like doing as a government official, because it's more a business thing where they can react quicker. I can't change things overnight without being in session. That's the reality of where I'm at. I'm handcuffed by that. I can't pass a law until day 1 of session, and I can't change the law after day 60 of session ends. So I'm hoping that we can look at the executive branch, but with your comments and your thoughts that you have sent me, and send me more, please. My email, I get it to my phone, so I'm constantly looking at my email. I will have these questions with the executive branch and make sure that some of this can be answered. And some of this we might not even be paying attention to. We may not even know about. One of the questions I mentioned asked earlier, I had no clue until it was asked that it was a problem with teacher retention yearly. So if you send me everything that you have your concerns on, I'll make sure that we ask those appropriate questions and try and answer it as we go forward.
Thank you, Senator Hutson. Thank you, Jessica, too, for joining us. Next up is Andrew Burke. Andrew, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you, Senator Hutson, for being here. I want to ask you a question kind of from the angle. I always like to take this angle, and I'll take it while I can. I'm 27. This is my 4th year teaching. So while I'm young, I'm going to flaunt that. And I want to say I graduated in 2012, and it was around 2011 that a lot of things changed in education with the investment plan and the FRS being emphasized over the pension, different testing requirements, different funding cuts that occurred, and annual contracts was a big one. So the tenure system converting to the annual contract system was happening when I was 17 and 18 years old. I had a wonderful public education in Gainesville, Florida. I had amazing teachers, and almost every teacher I had from K through 12 was 10 years plus in the classroom. I had very, very few inexperienced or young or new teachers. And I think that experience counts for a lot. I am seeing more and more that, our experienced teachers are leaving, and my generation's not really filling the gap. I was at Florida State University in the Honors College. I was an AP student. I had IB friends, that went to the IB schools, and all of these really, academic, high succeeding kids. No one wanted to be a teacher. No one was interested in this. And a lot of it has to really do with compensation. And I want to bring this to, this is my 4th year teaching. I'm in St. Johns County, but I live in Duval, and I used to teach in South Florida, and I also lived in another county that was different from where I lived before, and it's always been about funding. I think that as a single young person without parental support and without a spouse, it can be near impossible to find a way to even pursue this career financially, because you need to make 3 times the monthly rent. You can't buy property if you don't have savings yet. And so I think a lot of my peers that could be fantastic teachers and that have the heart to do it are landing in tech or business or in other fields that there already so much competition in, and there's not in education because there's openings everywhere. And so what the question I want to ask is, from an aspirational standpoint, what is your goal, or you believe to be the legislature's goal, in pursuing the ideal compensation package? Where are we trying to take education? The governor has laid forth his plan in the past and coming up of, I want teachers to be paid more. Where do you think, the ceiling is for Florida public educators? Where can we take this?
Great question, Andrew. First off, in my vocational bills that I've been doing over the past, you've got some amazing, in St. Johns County alone, amazing classes where St. Augustine High, I believe, teaches those classes where you can actually become an educator from day one. So in terms of that barrier where it's hard to find that field, it's out there, and I'm continuing to push for it. In terms of the dollar amount, I mean, obviously the sky's the limit, right? You're not going to get anything if you don't ask. But in terms of where we're at, I think that we've realized, and it took a lot of my colleagues to realize it too. Michelle, you may have actually sent me the email, but I had someone pull up where we were compared to other states, and we were at the bottom of the barrel. I could have sworn we paid more. The governor was way ahead of this. So I think that what you're going to see is us continue to push. Obviously, we've done the first-time educators, but every educator out there continue to push, because you're right, it is very hard. And with the senior teachers kind of transitioning out, where is that next brand of leadership coming from to educate our children? And God bless you. Thank God you're up there trying to do it yourself at a young age, but there's not that many of them out there. And until we start pushing the vocational route of, there's other great jobs out there for you outside of big tech, and until we start showing the benefits of you can make a good salary and a good living, we're going to have a problem. And it's not just your industry, by the way. I mean, it's every industry out there. If you got a problem with your HVAC, can you imagine how much it costs to bring somebody in for an hour just to fix your air conditioning system? I know, because I've done it. And it's great jobs for great people. So outside of divesting from your industry, there's just a lot of things that we have to do to educate people. Not everyone needs to go college bound and get some PhD to come back and get a good job. And in your industry, I thank God for those that did do the PhD, but in your industry as well, we need to recruit people, and we need to bring dollars here to make sure that they realize that this is a good job to have. And by the way, what better job? I taught back at my high school, or coached back at my high school. What better job to have than to educate young minds to try and get them on the right path? So thank you for that. And again, we'll continue to keep pushing.
Thank you, Andrew. We have Angela Hunter up next. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. Hutson, for taking this time to meet with us and talk with us today. I really appreciate that. And, to hear you speak about the vaccine for teachers, that's a real personal one for me, because I have a husband who's older with high blood pressure, and I have a 7-year-old with congenital heart disease that has had 3 open heart surgeries. So that's really important, because I'm sitting in my office still. I haven't gone home yet today. So to have somebody pushing for teachers with the governor Thank you for that one. But my question for you now is to kind of piggyback off of Andrew. And if it looks like I'm not looking at you, I apologize. I've got the dual monitor system, so I do apologize. Several years ago, there were some changes to mentor teachers and clinical ed training. And years ago, I was trained as a clinical ed teacher and could have an intern and a mentor. And about 3 years ago, I had to go through a brand new training because my old training was no longer valid. I needed new training. And one of those things that came through the legislation is that our mentors for these new teachers have to have this clinical ed mentor training. They don't get paid to participate in the training. On top of that, then our mentors have to give up time to work with these new teachers. And it's so critical to help a new teacher, somebody new into the field, whether it's alternative certification or, College of Ed graduate. It's important for them to have that veteran teacher providing, insight and feedback and, guidance along this process, because there's a lot of things we don't learn in school. And, this year alone, I had 2 phenomenal teachers, veteran teachers that were highly effective, resign mid-year because of the pressure of this year and being stretched so thin. And it's taken a long time, I'm saying over a month of an open classroom with a rotating sub to find somebody to replace these teachers. And these 2 new people are alternative certified, brand new to education, walking into a class that has been without teachers for a month. And I can't find a teacher to mentor them. And none of my veteran great teachers want to mentor because it's time and there's no compensation. There is no money. St. Johns County does not pay their mentors. The legislation put into effect that you have to have this training and these mentors are supposed to be there, but there's no funding with that. Is that something you would be willing to address to get the state to help fund mentoring so it's not up to individual districts? And I'm ashamed to say that St. Johns County is one of the few in the state that does not provide compensation for the hours that these teachers put in helping new teachers.
Thank you, Angela, for that question. I was not aware that the state did not fund a program they put in place. And I'm glad that you brought it up. I'm curious, so St. John's does not fund them, but almost every other county does. Did I hear you correctly?
I think that Michelle and maybe somebody from the state level, I know, I guess that was about 3 years ago, I was at a union meeting and I was going through a union mentor training program. And in that meeting, there were teachers from all over the state. And there were only 3 districts in that room where our district did not provide compensation for mentors. And St. Johns County was one of them. And some districts got $1,200. Some districts you got $100 per person that you were mentoring. Some gave you $300. It's all across the board. But I had a teacher today who emailed me back and she said, no, I'm not going to mentor this new teacher because it's time and energy. And if you're not going to pay me, I'm sorry, I have so much going on and I'm already stretched thin. I would love to help, but no. And I've gone through 4 teachers for this one person and I can't find anybody to mentor them.
I'll step in a little bit just to clarify. It is a program that's funded, but our district comes up woefully short on the mentor program. Angela and I have been through this, and they don't compensate the mentors. So that's some work we have to do on our end. But Travis, we'd always take your backing if you want to push in the county where your kids go to school, that one of the reasons teachers are leaving is that they don't have mentors. They don't have anyone to help them through those first years.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've actually just wrote it down here. I'm gonna look into that because if we're gonna set up a program that requires the district to do something, certainly we should fund it. I'm glad other districts are funding out of, it sounds like they're BSA, but we should not be putting something down on you guys and saying, go do it. But by the way, we're not gonna pay you. That makes no sense. So I'm glad you brought that up and I will definitely take a look at that as we go into session.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Angela. So I'm checking the clock. We just have a few more minutes on our town hall, but I do have 2 more hands up. So I'll ask the next 2 question askers to please Be brief in your questions so that we have a chance for last minute open comments. Next up is Carol Goronskis.
Senator Hutson, going back to the FSA and end of course standardized tests that we are going to ask our children to do. I just checked the book in St. Johns County on Friday. We had 1,772 children in quarantine. Tonight we have 1,532, and that number differs every single night, typically the beginning of the week. And by the end of the week, it is back up into the 1,700s, almost 2,000. I'm going to suggest, and I would hope that it could go forward from here, but would that money better be spent rather than on a testing company, on being able to remediate with our children, those that are missing 2 or 3 times, as you've said, when a child is in quarantine, it's not the same as in person. And we all know in person is the very best method of teaching. But would that money not be better spent being able to hire additional paras to support children who are falling behind in that COVID slide or summer school? And we just know that everyone, not only just in Florida, but across the country and across the world, are going to have a COVID slide. But technically, if they haven't learned it, it's okay. We can still work with that child. And so I'm just that's where I'm going to ask, where we couldn't save some money on some testing and put it where we really need it. And that is for a child to receive the remediation that they are going to need. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously that some of those are at the executive level with the commissioner. We could look into that. I could certainly talk to him, but at the end of the day, I still think we need to know where the kids are at. I need to know, we talk about COVID slide, how bad is it, right? Are we at 50% learning gains, or are we at 90%? And I don't know the answer. And this is just from a legislator standpoint. Again, they're making most of those decisions right now with some of our input, but I want to make sure that we're not sliding down the hill. And I don't think we are. I honestly think St. John's is doing pretty well. Granted, I know that there are kids out. I have my own, but I think St. John's is probably doing pretty well handling this pandemic in terms of educating our children. What I'm more afraid of, looking at it from a state perspective, is how is Flagler and Volusia, right? Because they've always been behind the curve. And I want to make sure that they're doing the right things. And if they're not, what can they learn from us? And so I as much as I want to say, yeah, I'd love to put money somewhere else, I still need to see the data from these kids. Not that I want to punish any teacher, not that I want to punish any child. I just want to make sure that what we've implemented is the right thing to do. And if we need to make changes and we're way behind the 8 ball, then I'm gonna get back on this conference call that we have in about a couple months and say, hey, tell me what you think we need to do, because clearly we've not done it right. So that's kind of my mindset of where we're at.
Thank you, Carol. The last question we have on board before we have a few minutes for any open discussion is Kelly Abbott-Tennessee. Kelly, go ahead.
Yes, Senator Hutson, thank you again. Andrew actually brought up something when he was talking about getting teachers and getting people to come into the field and stay into the field. Senate Bill 736 was the legislation in 2011 that changed a lot of things. But one of the things that I think has made a big impact in us not being able to attract and retain teachers is the language that everyone is on annual contract. I know some counties have been able to kind of negotiate around that a little bit. St. Johns County, they are very much letter to the law. So they will not put anything in our contract that gives us any protections, even if teachers have shown great performance year after year after year. It's to the point now, sir, that I don't know if you're aware of this, but as we grow in St. Johns County and there are new schools opening, existing schools that have teachers right now who don't get transferred to these new schools are actually cut. They are actually fired due to budget when we have a shortfall of teachers somewhere else in the county. So would you consider trying to add some language at the state level that allows districts to offer extended contracts, even if it's 2 or 3 year contracts to their employees, rather than to cut good teachers, effective and highly effective teachers due to budget, just because their existing school has to lose faculty members because they're opening a new school?
Thank you for that question. I want the school districts to have as much flexibility as possible. So I didn't realize they were cutting teachers because new school opened up, but based on some of the things that were mentioned tonight, I certainly want to look at those annual contracts, and I want to see where we can give more flexibility for the highly effective teachers and the effective teachers, and make sure that if we're putting a hamper on them or the school district, we need to open that up and make sure that they have that flexibility to keep and retain them.
All right, thank you. And that would be wonderful. One more thing, you were talking about the vaccine and for teachers. I just want to make you aware, if you're in any of these conversations at the state level, St. Johns County School District, we have our own medical centers, and they have tried to get on the list to be a site to be able to dispense vaccines. So that might be a great way if you guys wanted to ever work with them in this county in trying to distribute the vaccines to employees of the school district. I think they would be able to do it efficiently and effectively without having to drag in other health systems in the community. So I just wanted to share that with you as well.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I actually spoke again to some of your administrators. Flagler Health Plus is got the contract with you guys. So if we were going to do anything for teachers, I'm looking when I do get in front of the governor, possibly I worked with him to get the pilot program in Publix in St. Johns County, in Flagler counties. And I would look to do the same thing, some type of pilot program with Flagler Health Plus so that they can administer the vaccines to our teachers and see how that works to try and take it statewide.
Thank you, Kelly. We have 5 minutes left on our town hall with Senator Hutson. If there is anybody who wants to have any comments or brief questions in these last few moments, I'll entertain those now. So I'll look for raised hands. Kevin Gamble, you're up.
Yeah, Senator Hutson, thank you for your time. Appreciate you being here and giving us the time and answering the questions. Real quick, we used to have a great program called the National Board Teachers, which would really solve a lot of what we talked about. And for some reason, it was never explained why it was phased out. And that program did a lot of things. It first of all rewarded great teachers, paid them a nice bonus. It was a very rigorous program put together by teachers. And the big thing about it was that it also required them to mentor young teachers coming up through. And that program has been phased out and for no reason. I think you need to look back at that program and reinstating it. So thank you. Appreciate your time. Also, want you to know I was the coach who got your name up on the big board there at Pedro Menendez for your 4x100 record. So you're welcome and great job on that. I mean, your more fleet of foot days there. So that's a record that's going to be tough to be beat too, by the way. So anyway. All right.
Thank you, Kevin. I tell everybody that I don't go by years. That was many pounds ago that I used to be able to run.
Thank you, Kevin. Christy Brown, you are up. Christy, unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, my mic button, I do that. I'm like extra cautious. I don't want to be eavesdropping on me. I teach civics, and I want to commend you for saying that you didn't realize something was a problem until we told you. And I want to tell my students about that because we're talking about First Amendment and petitioning the government. And I try to tell them, you know, it's really just contacting your lawmakers, because if they don't know, they don't know. Right. So I just love that you are here listening to us. But I made it in the comment here, and I just want to make you aware of it. I love data. I'm actually super excited because we've had issues here with testing data. I don't have any for the past 2 years, and I'd really like some. But it really has to be a promise to not have that affect kids. My test is 30% of their grade for my class for the year. So I don't know if you know that. And they also need it to go to high school. It's super important that is not going to hurt them. And I'm trying really hard to cushion their grade in the classroom, but I can only do so much if they can't read to take that test, because it is sort of a reading test too. My other comment is that I think that through you and your colleagues supporting us and showing the value of educators is really what will also help boost things for us. I don't think even in the pandemic, we had that high in May of teachers are superheroes, and then it kind of fizzled. And so in a way, somehow teaching needs to be put back up on that pedestal. We need to look at it differently. And I think that could change some things for us in the field and draw more people in. That's all.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, I'm going to advocate to the governor and the commissioner that the testing, although we want the data, not penalize or harm your children, those that you're trying to teach. I think that when it comes to elevating your status and dollar amount, I mean, there's just been a disconnect from the Florida legislature and the Education Foundation. I mentioned before in 2014, Governor Scott said fund teachers. Well, if you looked at what happened, we gave, again, I think it was almost $200 for the BSA increase to go fund teachers. That did not happen around the state. So what did the legislature do the next year? We created the best and brightest. And I know that's terrible for some people to hear, but it was the goal of, if the school districts are going to listen to us, this is how we're going to do it. And it was a runaround for the school district. It did not work. Obviously, it's been repealed. We've gotten rid of it. But the goal is, how do you fund teachers and tell the local governments to fund teachers if you're not doing it through the BSA? And when we send money down, I think that there's a disconnect between us wanting to fund you, the school district getting the money, you guys getting into contract negotiations, and then all of a sudden you're not getting what you think you're getting, and then all of a sudden it's the legislature's fault. And I know Michelle's done a great job working with her local government, but we've tried again and again to try and fund our teachers, and maybe there's a better way to do it. We're just trying to give that flexibility at the local level, but I don't think anybody should come up to Tallahassee and think that your Republican leadership or your senator wants to harm the teachers. I mean, like I said, you've done an amazing job, specifically this year. We just want to make sure that we're giving you the money that you can. And sometimes there's just that disconnect where you don't understand. We're trying to hand you everything and it's just not going into your pockets by the time it trickles all the way down. And that's something we got to do a better job on. And it's something that we need to work with our school districts on. So I hear you loud and clear. I want to get you up there. I want to fund you more. And hopefully we can come out of this thing with more money in a year or two from now, and we can just continue to keep funding those of you that need those dollars, because it's definitely important to keep you in the classroom for these children.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Senator Hutson. We are at time. It is 6:32, so our town hall is at its ending time. I want to truly thank each of you, each of our union members and our guests who joined us tonight, and especially Senator Travis Hutson. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day and the legislative committees to join us. This is what it's all about. This is what our union does, is communicate with our legislators. So you will hear from me as president asking you to contact your elected legislators, whether it's Senator Hutson or someone else. We have got to stay in touch with them and have this open dialogue. And Travis Hutson, thank you again for joining us, and thank you for always being willing to speak with me and hear the concerns in St. Johns County. That means a lot as union president. Thank you.
Thank you all. And as I said before, call me, emails, I get them all. If there's a bill you don't like and you got ideas to change it, send it to me. I'd love to work with members to try and get something more palatable. That if there's something you love, send it to me too. I'd love to work on that as well. So I'm as accessible as I can be, especially during these times. So thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate it. Take care. Bye.